हर बार the moment you bring something original, something from absolutely from scratch, this problem you are going to face when you are sitting with the massive studio systems and their executives. They firmly believe उनका वो survival है that we know what audience wants.
The recent interview of Rahi Anil Barve for Maya Sabha compelled me to explore projects that went against the tide of what is usually expected from writers and directors when pitching their movies for funding. Countless number of stories that I have heard often compel creators to formulate something that is a derivative of a project that is already successful, not something that is entirely unique or having its own identity. History has not been kind to most of our out-of-the-box projects, but when I do look back on some of my favorite ventures across the years, they also represented experiences in theatres where I was blown away by the journey of the movie from a script POV to the shape that it finally took on the big screen. It provided faith in me as a movie lover that there are still some people willing to bet on the obviously wild and pull it off too. This includes projects like the Rahi Anil Barve directed film Tumbad, a wacky and genuinely funny comedy like Delhi Belly, a zombie thriller like Go Goa Gone, a zany crime thriller with insane twists like Andhadhun, a drama with so much layered subtext like No Smoking, or the extremely underrated revenge saga like Lal Kaptan, a movie that I believe had insane potential to become its own graphic novel, or something as wacky as Ayya that flips stereotypical portrayals in cinema on its head so well. These are examples when high concept movies that were written on paper, irrespective of their financial outcome at the box office, translated into exceptional tales on the big screen. This video is not about those films though. The video wants to focus on projects that utterly failed in translating these high concepts or novel ideas on the big screen, either because the project was heavily altered from its original idea, got ruined due to the soft landing approach to make it palatable for the Indian audience, or just whimpered as the second half of the film commenced. Getting right into it, here is Tried&Refused Productions with 11 out-of-the-box Bollywood concepts ruined in movies. Blue. On paper, Blue was quite ambitious for its time, a big-budget underwater action thriller with international locations, stated to be, at least for the time, Bollywood's most expensive project, scuba diving set pieces, insane car chases, and a genre Bollywood had never seriously attempted before. The idea of mixing treasure hunting with friendship, betrayal, and redemption had real cinematic potential. But where Blue completely collapsed was the structure of its screenplay and its attempt in being cool versus creating an engaging, twisting, and surprising tale. The screenplay felt like it was written around action sequences rather than the core conflict, which was the monetary motivations that come in the way of friendship. The emotional stakes felt like they were missing, and even when I reflect on the movie, the characters, their names, and personalities are hazy, as the main focus of the film remained to be how aesthetically impressive it can be, and of course, how Kylie Minogue can shake a leg on Chiggy Wiggy. As the film progressed, even the twist, villain arc, the attempt at a redemption felt too lackluster, as holistically, the film just prioritized style over storytelling. Batti Gul Meter Chalu. This is a movie that has progressively pissed me off as more time has passed, as it had a novel and relevant concept, talking about the issues the common man has to deal with, especially regarding the oppressive ways of capitalists who trample on individuals. In this regard, it was pertaining to exorbitant electricity prices and the common man taking the legal route to teach these companies a lesson. However, the film was all over the place from a screenplay POV. Vipul Rawal, the writer of the movie, recently expressed his frustration on how terribly the movie faltered in its execution. A movie that was originally set in Maharashtra was shifted to Uttarakhand, with characters consistently conversing with each other in this insipid version of what they believe the locals speak like, that the dialogues itself got on your nerves.
So जो पहली मीटिंग हुई जब हमारी मैं शाहिद जब when शाहिद was on board and उनके घर पे ही तो ऐसा क्योंकि आई नोटिस कि ये दोनों मुझे तो बड़े बेवकूफ़ टाइप के लगे। मैंने कहा यार ये क्या है बातें कर रहे हैं, तब वो सिंकिंग फीलिंग आ गई कि मेरी फिल्म बर्बाद हो गई।
The marketing of the film revealed a key plot twist even before the release. The triangle love story was such that no one really cared about the characters until the time the court proceedings started. The audience had already clocked out of the film, a movie that Yami Gautam had already envisioned to fail when she saw the final cut, as she did not understand what happened in its ultimate execution, and a performance that Shahid Kapoor reflects on and states it was one of his weakest performances in years. Junoon. This was a film that I often watched when it used to come on cable television. Sporadically so because I thought it was pretty cool to see Rahul Roy's shapeshift into a tiger on screen. It had one of the most interesting concepts inspired by a 1981 film titled An American Werewolf in London. It was a supernatural love story involving shapeshifting, obsession and madness. The idea of a man cursed to transform into a beast driven by desire was generally bold for early 90s Hindi cinema. However, the film collapses under its own ambition. I believe owing to the consistent problem of the soft landing approach by creators, the writing never fully committing to being a psychological horror or supernatural tragedy, but this odd hybrid with generic commercial movie beats that dampen the intention of being a high concept film. For the era in which it is made, the sequences of tragedy that should be terrifying also became unintentionally funny, especially if you were to rewatch them today, specifically with Rahul Roy's obsession with Pooja Bhatt's character. The pacing is erratic, the innumerable romantic songs and the long stretches of build-up followed by rushed payoffs just dampen the film. Horror in the 90s were like a needle in a haystack. The only one I vividly remember that aced atmospheric tension was Raat, that released in the same year. This could have been India's answer to gothic horror romance, but aged terribly due to its poor execution. 8x10 Tasveer. The premise of 8x10 Tasveer is genuinely intriguing. A man who can enter photographs, the memory of the event in the photograph can be experienced through different POVs, and one engages in making use of such abilities in order to uncover a mystery tied to his father's death. That's a high concept psychological thriller begging for subtlety, restraint, and a laser sharp focus on its screenplay. The film, in my opinion, was scrutinized a little too harshly for its time, for I genuinely believe there is something still very novel about the idea, and the execution in some way also managed to make it at least a decent enough thriller. I, however, feel that the reason why this Nagesh Kuknur directed film failed was because the Akshay Kumar double role felt more like a casting trick than a narrative necessity. And what was the biggest crime was that the emotional weight of the father-son relationship is never deeply explored, something that is the driving force taking the storyline forward. The producer of the film, Shailendra Singh, who was heading Percept Pictures at the time, speaks about how the film became progressively more expensive, in turn also losing out on the purpose of why it was initially being made.
I told Akshay, I said, bro, nobody came to watch your film. You have to take some responsibility for this. I mean, at the end of the day, because you took a lot of money from me for this film. You buy a Lexus Land Cruiser in 4 crores and it doesn't work then? You go to the showroom, na? So I went to the showroom. Nothing happened.
A thriller that I believe had a great concept at hand, but whimpered along the way as it spoon-fed each and every twist near its climax. Roy. This movie sold itself as a layered psychological thriller about art, crime and identity. The idea of a thief whose persona inspires fiction, blurring the lines between reality and imagination, was genuinely fascinating. What I think this movie faulted in was not just its boring narrative style, but its marketing that heavily relied on its beautiful music and sold to the public that this may just be a triangle love story in which Ranbir Kapoor will play a significant role. The reality when people went to the theatre was far from that. The screenplay has an extremely confusing structure. What seems like an attempt to establish more depth seemed contrived and just to paper over the cracks of a weak screenplay. The emotional connection to the characters is more or less absent, making the identities of the people who they are, the emotional upheaval that they are going through on screen, extremely vague and confusing, disorienting the audience in the process. Events followed, but you feel nothing. The visuals provide for a moody aesthetic, beautiful locations, but nothing can really elevate the weak and honestly boring storytelling, as Jacqueline features as the romantic interest in both reality and the figment of Arjun Rampal's imagination of the third film of his trilogy.
Really liked Roy. I don't know how many of you will agree to me, but
I also don't agree with you.
The movie just reminds me of the early days of YouTube and Ashish Chanchlayani's hilarious review of the movie. Ra.One. Another film that I believe many film fans, especially cinema enthusiasts who love superhero films, were rooting for was Ra.One. While its revisionism with the terrible product that we saw in the form of Adipurush is something that we have actively discussed, a case of nostalgia overpowering objective analysis, but Ra.One as a holistic product is nothing short of frustrating. It's the need for the making makers to be anything and everything versus an unapologetic superhero film that really brings the quality of the movie down. I mean, it's fascinating when you think about it on paper. Characters in games, your own digital creations gaining a conscience and physical form and wreaking havoc in reality. The lines between digital and reality blurring, but the need to force in several commercial themes ruined this movie. You have everything from forced and uninformed Tamil slang, a terrible Shah Rukh Khan wig, Satish Shah humping the air, Kareena Kapoor doing a thesis on Punjabi galis, and a game that just did not seem practical enough to be a smash hit. Inundated with unnecessary gags and possibly the worst cameo of a legend, this superhero film had so much potential to be a good versus evil Ramayan face-off in the modern age, but became a slapstick comedy with dispersed action, and the highlight being that the meme of Arjun Rampal and Kareena Kapoor's identity still lives long.
आई थिंक जो अगर बहुत किफ़ायत में जवाब दूं तो फिल्म की जो एम्बिशन थी कि हम सबको समेट लें, मौसियों को, चाचियों को, बुआओं को भी समेट लें,
फैमिली क्लास भी बन जाए, थ्रिलर भी
वो
बन जाए।
एम्बिशन रॉन्ग हो गई।
Rudraksh. This is a movie that is for the history books as it progressed into becoming one of the most unintentionally funny movies I have ever seen. A sci-fi thriller involving ancient weapons, nuclear physics, spiritual mythology, and probably the worst case of VFX that seemed like the blueprint of what the makers of Adipurush may have observed as their source of inspiration. Rudraksh tried to merge mysticism and modern science, and it was a khichdi of ideas with the most surface level understanding of extremely complex subjects. I mean, Bipasha Basu plays Dr. Gayatri Singh, who is a paranormal researcher in the University of California doing research on spirit possession, voodoo and healing powers. Who the hell is even funding such research? Sanjay Dutt with his attempt at Japanese martial arts and even a hairdo straight out of the hippie movement from the 70s America was the least of the film's problems. An interesting concept of Ra.One's Rudraksh coming in the wrong hands and developing great demigod-like strengths falters completely in the CGI slop battle between Sunil Shetty and Sanjay Dutt. An interesting good versus evil story, which could have been India's rare edition in the sci-fi space, was best suited to be ridiculed in one of the funniest pretentious movie reviews episodes on YouTube. Bawaal. I wanted to root for this movie because it was a Nitesh Tiwari directed movie, but the tone-deaf turn this movie took in the second half absolutely took a nosedive for me for it to become a train wreck. The chapter of Germany and especially its dialogues were audacious. Janvi states, हम सब भी तो थोड़े बहुत हिटलर जैसे हैं ना, जो अपने पास है उससे खुश नहीं है, जो दूसरों के पास है वो चाहिए. It reminds me of the career hacks Hitler meme where Ranveer Alabadia had tried to insinuate that Hitler was evil, but who isn't? The attempt by the makers is to compare the conquest and bloodshed caused by Hitler for world domination to humans' constant need and wanting more. Cycle hai to bullet chahiye is an exact example that Janvi states while naming Hitler in the same sentence. It made me realize that I know what the makers might be going for, but they're saying it in the worst way possible. Ajju compares his projection versus reality directly to Hitler's downfall. The conflict of marriage through an Auschwitz survivor and his personal anecdote has a convenient connection to Ajju and Nisha's story, but to represent their marriage visually like being in a gas chamber and as debilitating as Jews in a concentration camp is where I absolutely disconnected. That just to trigger change in Ajju, such a drastic parallel was needed for him to just be more empathetic and human is hilarious. Traveling through a traumatic chapter of history and empathizing and acknowledging one's privilege is one thing, but to create a parallel with one's trivial squabbles to a terrible dictator and his atrocities just came across as tone deaf. Brahmastra. I think we have countless number of times discussed what was the biggest failing of Brahmastra, but I think what was the most heartbreaking element of watching this film was the expectations we consumed ourselves with, seeing the marketing snippets of the film and the dumbed down simplistic version of the storyline we got. I mean, after everything you tell me that the power of love supersedes everything, it's almost as if Ayan shot at our wild imagination and gave us the most textbook kids book resolution. I think beyond the dialogues and the romance, which were huge demerits to the screenplay of the film, it was the lack of purpose with Alia Bhatt's character, her sole contribution being shouting Shiva's name, that really bummed people out. The lost potential with exceptional characters played by Nagarjuna and Shah Rukh Khan, the constant stalling by Amitabh Bachchan, and the rushed exposition of Shiva's past, it all eventually became a tiring mess.
We felt like if we spoke about it from a very modern lens, were tongue-in-cheek about it in a few places, that mix of modernity, a little bit of jokingness with more serious stuff, that combination would kind of work well for the film.
A deep dive on the world of Astras with a laser-focused approach on Shiva's origin story and a face-off against the ultimate boss was the cliffhanger we all wanted. But we got a spiel of light roshni hai aur pyar ki aag that really made us feel we got shortchanged by a movie which had so much potential. Dhaakad. Triggered by a trauma from an early age, and the journey of Agni commences. But the treatment almost seemed as if the creators were behind submitting an assignment on deadline day. The scenes are chopped up in such a messy manner that you shift between continents and emotions in such quick succession, you almost get confused and slightly annoyed. I had spoken about this to Lakshraj Anand, the director of Attack as well. A similar problem that the high concept film felt trapped in. That in the process of you feeling that you don't want to waste the time of the audience, you compromise the effectiveness of your storytelling, not letting us connect with the characters, and all we are left with are beautiful frames and set pieces, not human stories. Dhaakad boasted of aesthetic and stylized set pieces and frames. It failed to, however, grasp hold of your attention because of its weak screenplay, something that is a make it or break it element for any film. This had all the ingredients to be a legendary female spy film if tweaked in several departments, but honestly, it missed the mark in etching itself as the start of something special in the film industry. Thi Daayan. Please do me a favor right now and revisit the first trailer of Thi Daayan that dropped on YouTube close to 13 years ago. The movie promised us probably the scariest Hindi film through this trailer. The eerie background score, the exposition of the lore behind the Daayan's strength, the potential was insane, and the movie exceptionally presented us this potential through the first half. You were drawn into the lore, a little Sara Arjun with her big brother being petrified of Konkana Sen Sharma, and so were we as viewers as the kids went on escapades in their high-rise apartment building, pressing 666 to what they assumed to be the gateway to hell. But the nosedive that the movie took in the second half should be a crime in itself. The integration of Kalki's character simply being a smokescreen to the doubts in Bobo's head, the big reveal of Konkana and Huma, and the powers being reinstated through human sacrifices were portrayed in a very unintentionally funny fashion, especially when the final battle became a concoction of wire work as Imran and Konkana duel it out with each other. A great concept that faltered due to the nosedive the film took in its second half. And that was a video, guys. Write down in the comments below which are high concept Bollywood movies that you believe were ruined in its ultimate execution. Please don't forget to follow me on Instagram. The handle's right in front of you. Follow me at JammyPants4. Also, please support us by smashing the like button and subscribing to our channel for weekly content ahead. Thank you for watching.